All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode on this channel. This is not really a series or anything, but, well, I guess this is the second episode with me and Adam discussing Palantir and expectations going into 2024. Hope everyone has been having a good holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We are one day away from 2024, which is pretty crazy. So in this episode, we're really just going to discuss what happened in 2023 and what we think could happen for Palantir in 2024. For those that don't know Adam, he was on my channel about a month ago. His Twitter is in the description, Palantir's _Palantir. He is one of, I would say, the foremost experts on what Palantir is doing in the government space, what Palantir is doing in terms of their intellectual property and their patents, and really how they've been able to cultivate a massive, essentially, penetration in the U.S. government space that is hopefully going to expand internationally. So we're going to be talking about a lot of that and many more topics on today's episode. Adam, how are you doing?
Good. Appreciate you having me on. Glad the fans enjoyed having me on and they're willing to stick out and see me again. Doing pretty well. 2023, obviously very good year for the stock. For some bag holders, you might not be broken even yet. You still might be in the red, but for all those in the fellowship, those 20 OG bag holders, I promise we're coming for you next year. So good year, got a great year ahead of us. So it should be exciting times ahead.
Yeah, Palantir ended the year 162% up officially. That's the number 160.64%, $17.15, up $10.57, which is, I mean, not bad. Look, it beat the S&P by a lot, beat the NASDAQ, QQQ. And if you got in at the lows or decently DCA'd, then you've done well. So let's start off with this. I guess give me your, I don't know, top 3 to 5 things you liked that Palantir did in 2023, and then you can sprinkle in some of the things you didn't like, and then we'll discuss going into 2024.
Well, I think the first two that are very obvious is they shifted their go-to-market strategy with the boot camp. I think that's a given one. That's definitely the biggest thing that I think I liked is how they were able to shift to that. The second thing that I really liked about the 23 was their, I don't want to use the word pushing for hires for the for the digital artificial intelligence office. I don't want to sound like they're buying their way in there, but that was really something that was really remarkable is they're able to poach these other, professionals that have been in the government space for 5, 10, 15 years or more so, or they were working with Palantir in their past lives and now they are in a high-end government, space. And we'll talk about some later in the stream because that CDAO office is going to be massive for them, especially in 24 in the future. And then the third thing, and this is definitely one that's pure me, is the headset. So, I mean, if you're like me that's been following that, when we got the, I said it before, when Ted said, yet, and then the next day we get the headset behind Carp, those were definitely
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So those were definitely the 3 greatest things. I mean, obviously right below that is probably winning NHS just because of the significance behind it. The things that I didn't really like is they are, the first half of the year, obviously they stuck their usual, we're going to go to the IT team and, they figured it out. That's fine. And there's a lot of things I really didn't, quote unquote, didn't dislike. I mean, I really like the company. I really like the leadership. I like the vision. Could they, do better in telling investors more of the revenue breakdown? I think so. I think because a lot of, people that are very interested in that, like you and others, they want to know, well, is Gotham driving $500 million or is it Foundry? So
right.
It's something I think we'd like to see, but that's nothing that's really, all in all, I really had no problems with this year from Palantir, the company side, and from Palantir, the stock side, obviously.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I think 2023 was just a phenomenal year for shareholders. I mean, going into the year, I think stock was at like $6 in January. It was the highest level of doubt we've ever seen. Now, granted, the whole market was down, but in terms of Palantir, I mean, a lot of people had written them off. Basically, a company that was just full of hype stock, meme kids, not really growing. And then I think they fundamentally shifted, right?
100%.
Instead of going for growth, they went for profitability, which is just the smartest thing ever in a world in which you literally can't grow because of interest rates and all that stuff. Like, all right, let's go for profitability. They nibbled down. They introduced a brand new product that seemingly was the right time, right moment, because it was encapsulating everything going on with LLMs. I think there's going to be trillions of dollars of GDP growth just based on the nature of what LLMs will do over the next decade. And institutional investment also really changed. It's the highest it's ever been. You got people like Dan Ives talking about you who have massive influence. You've got Cathie Wood buying back into stock. You got Bank of America that's bullish. You've got other banks, Raymond James that's bullish. You got a couple RBCs and Citibanks that have their theses, but you got a lot of institutions saying, all right, let's see what you got. And now I think 2024 is their year to expand. So let's start off with this question. 2023, we're at the lows. Stock goes up 160%, and it matches what happened with all the other stocks. How do you feel about 2024 in terms of their execution? Because now I feel like if they don't perform in 2024, 2023 really didn't matter. It was kind of just like a macro recovery. 2024 is what sustains the multiple and expands the multiple. So I guess, what are your general thoughts before we go deeper into the significance of how important 2024 is from an execution perspective to justify the current multiple?
Yep, 100%. And for those that follow me, know me, speak with me every day in the Discord and whatnot, I'm not a very big on the day-to-day financials of the stock itself. I mean, because for me, I'm not looking to invest for today and sell tomorrow. I'm looking to hold on to this puppy for a good solid decade plus. So, for someone like myself, I look at it as Palantir has zero control in the physical stock action. They did initiate the buyback program, which will obviously have some effect to the stock price if they started to use that buyback program, or maybe they didn't, and we'll find that out on Q4. But the company must execute. And like you said, they are not going to get that multiple expansion unless the revenues start to grow and they increase their profit. I think they are extremely, extremely buttoned up, and they're very cautious. And, with one of the people that I follow on Twitter, I'm sure many of the Palantir people do, Mike Long Term, he's great follow, and he's been stressing it, as they grow, they're going to need to hire people to satisfy this growth. So it's going to take a little bit of can we find the right balance to bring in more people to maintain the growth and grow the current client without adding extreme level of cost, obviously an increase in stock-based compensation, which all the bears, for whatever reason, when they talk about Palantir, their first point is the SBC, which is fine, but other companies have more or higher SBC, like a Snowflake, but we're not here to talk about that. But that's just how they want to play. So for Palantir, what they need to do is they need to hit their guidance. They need to beat their guidance. And I don't know if they're going to have that alpha growth moment in Q1. I don't know if it's going to come in Q2. It might come in Q3. It might come in Q4. I know some of the other people, they're waiting for it. It's going to come. I just don't think it's going to happen necessarily next quarter. I don't know if it will happen the quarter after that, just because of the lag of the fiscal fund rate being high, they're reorganizing the enterprise, whatever it might be. So it will be okay. The main thing for me as a shareholder is customer growth, revenue growth. You got to if they can get back to above 30, if they get to 30, 40%, its multiple is going to go like crazy because they're back at like 20.
Yeah.
And it's very, very possible they can do this. In my honest opinion, and I don't really think it's that far-fetched, they can receive $2 billion in revenue just from the government defense side in 24. So,
and right now they're doing about 1.2 billion TTM. You're saying that could go up a lot.
It can go up significantly. And if that one side of the business is doing all of 23 revenue, obviously it was like 2.1, 2.2, whatever they guided for, the commercial is obviously going to bring it back up. So I think for next year, I wouldn't be surprised when we get the Q4 call if they give a full year 24 guidance of a much higher $2 billion revenue number. Usually Q1 is their weakest. They have said in the 10Q and Q3, and I think we're going to get more confirmation in the 10Q and Q4, that Q1's looking pretty strong. And for those that don't know, and shout out to Lord Grimm, great follow, they got paid 182 million pounds the other week for the NHS contract.
Right.
So that's money on the books. That's going to be counted towards Q3, I would imagine. And then they also got paid $35 million for, I forget, I'm completely blanking on it, but I did tweet about it. They got $35 million.
You're doing so many tweets, it's hard to keep up.
It was for the Vantage extension. They got 35 million. So, you're talking, so, it's very possible. I see the debate all the time in the Discord, on the Twitter, elsewhere. Government's not sexy to some people. That's fine. Military, classified, secret info, that's sexy. And Uncle Sam is the biggest spender in the entire world. I don't care if you're Apple. I don't care if you're Microsoft, NVIDIA. There's no one bigger than Uncle Sam when it comes to enterprise spending. And they're coming after that. And we'll get into it.
And let me share this real quick. This was a great tweet by Eddie at FrugalBuck on Twitter. Just speaking on AIP. So this is a quote from Palantir's Q3 2023 earnings, what Sham said. Sham said, we're also seeing the acceleration of larger deals and shorter times to conversion and expansion, including a multi-year deal in excess of $40 million with one of the largest home construction companies in the US to start up, pilot, and convert it all within Q3. Now, I think a lot of people forgot about that quote, and it was a really good quote for Eddie to bring back up, which is, we know that there's a housing supply shortage. So we know, obviously, companies are looking to start creating more housing construction companies. Warren Buffett last quarter invested in a bunch of housing construction companies. So Palantir said, okay, let's see if we can, make a deal. They piloted a deal in 90 days with one of the largest construction companies in America. We don't know the exact name. And then they closed a multi-year deal in excess of $40 million attributed to AIP. So they figured out how to monetize AIP revenue growth from theoretically a go-to-market strategy that included actually building out a pilot and then actually close the deal all in one quarter. Whereas in the past, that would take 7-8 months just to get that deal. And who knows if it would be $40 million or $20 million. So I think that is one thing that maybe we are being too conservative in terms of the rate of time to value in regards to conversion for some of these AIP contracts. I know a lot of us are incredibly bearish, and for the right reasons, that AIP has not been monetized yet, and we don't know when it's really going to show up on the books. And maybe it's not Q1, but as you said, if that customer count starts to go up and they start closing these deals that quickly within those 90 days and actually are able to put that revenue on their books, then AIP growth is going to take off. And the question simply becomes, have the boot camps that they've shown they've done, which is in excess of 400, actually going to lead to massive amounts of clients? And, we'll find out in the next 2 months.
I think it will. I mean, they might not close all these clients at $40 million. They might get a ton of $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 million deals. But that's okay, because they're all going to add up. And eventually,
exactly. That's better to me. You get 20 clients at 1 million, even if the revenue growth sucks, because they will upsell. You're not leaving Palantir once you get in them. Yeah.
And I did watch the stream with you and Coach Drap, and I know he mentioned it on the boot camps, and he would have way more knowledge about the boot camps than I would, obviously. And it seems like they're extremely good. They're opening the door and they're getting the customer to ask the right question, which is what they want to do. Right. But just from an outsider, it looks like the question is such a complex thing to answer, and the solution is so much more complex than that when they leave these boot camps, they're kind of confused, because they got their use case, they go back to their boss, they're like, hey, this is great. Look what we're able to do. We did this in 2 days. But now they're like, but we also need A, B, and C, because we need blah, blah, and because it's all part of Foundry. And their goal is just to sell them Foundry and Apollo all in one. So it will see. They're still going to work out kinks in the boot camps. And like you said, they're going to get that revenue. They're going to get that customer growth. It's just a matter of, can they maintain this quickness of 90 days? Or is it going to be, 7-8 months? On some of them, they might be long. I mean, I know I bring it up every time I do a Spaces or I go on with you. The Berkshire link, it is active still. Every time I speak to either, I always ask them. That's the only company or enterprise in the world, maybe with the exception of Apple, where I would say as a shareholder, if they want another year, give it to them.
Yeah.
That's fine.
You could have it. Okay, Buffett, you got it.
They could take 24 months. But all these other companies, they necessarily can. So it should be exciting on a commercial side. And that's just the AIP. And we'll see. They're going to come out with stuff this year that will help bring in more people to attend the boot camp, or to grow the boot camp, and to get those customers to expand their, Palantir usage.
Dude,
so
I think boot camps are going to be phenomenal in 2024, and I think we got to really give them grace. Give them a year and a half to let that materialize. It's a go-to-market strategy that I haven't seen been done at scale before. Of course, companies have done presentations and stuff, but this is different. And if they get a chance to scale that, I think it's going to be phenomenal. All right, let's transition to this. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about 2024. Let's start off with one of the topics you wanted to discuss, which is space. Space was really interesting to me when I started first discovering Palantir because of their Meta Constellation product. For those that don't know, essentially using geospatial intelligence to do real-time tracking of data on the edge with AI, so on real devices, not having to go back to a cloud to communicate with someone. And you can, find a variety of different things, a variety of different use cases, whether it involves climate change or whether it involves being on the battlefield. So many different things. If a hurricane's coming up, what you should do with your supply chains. There's just so many integrated ways that software can actually help the world. They invested in Black Sky before, which is a company that also did stuff like that. What are your expectations for 2024 in regards to space? We know SpaceX is there. We know Rocket Lab's there. They're more in the commercialization of space. How do you think Palantir is going to try to penetrate that sector in 2024?
Well, it's funny that you just mentioned SpaceX because, I don't know if anybody, you should follow Deep Value also. He's a really great Twitter follow. The past few months, he's kind of been suckered into my rabbit hole of this whole defense thing, and he's been great at digging up info. He actually sent me this morning. SpaceX actually launched a classified payload with an X-37B this morning. No one knows what's on it. But it's related to the NASA Seeds 2 program, which has to do with, transmitting signals and plant life. It's crazy stuff. I really don't know much about it to talk about it, so I'm trying not to. But space, it's going to be the premier frontier for everything, with the exception of maybe the cyber portion, because cyber is its own quote unquote man-made domain, if that makes sense. Space, everything that is going on in Earth is being tracked from space. So Palantir has to be able to see what's going on and leverage the satellites up in space to the operator in anywhere, any way that they need it. And that's what Meta Constellation does. So with space, there's a couple things that I wanted to touch up on. So I did tweet the other day about the United States Geospatial Intelligence, board. So Black Sky and Hawkeye are both board members of this program. And obviously Black Sky, we know that connection with Palantir, and Hawkeye, when I looked into it, was also mentioned in the SkyKit papers. So Palantir is, they invested in Black Sky and sold out, but they're building relationships with organizations and enterprises that are the premier GeoNet, if you will. I don't know really how to pronounce the acronym for space. And it's all about, geospatial tagging, imagery, satellites, that whole nine yards. What Palantir is doing is they're allowing the operators or the Army or whomever to access Meta Constellation. And then with Meta Constellation, you can use a Black Sky or a Hawkeye, and you can pull whatever the specific imagery that those two companies designed with their platform to get your answers and make your decision. So
they would license Meta Constellation to a company or government entity that's trying to extract research or information from a different data source and use Meta Constellation as like the analytics platform to connect them.
Correct. And that's sort of where this whole FedStart thing is going to. And this is where it's all tied in. And this one thing that I wanted to bring up is called Project Vista. So Project Vista, it is about getting small businesses to sell to the Department of Defense. And this has been an ongoing project for about 2-3 years now. And one of the main components about Project Vista is specifically space, because NASA, as great as NASA is, and they have a very long history, let's be honest, the past 20, 30 years, they haven't been very innovative in terms of bringing new technologies to the world. Elon brought, reusable rockets. Why wasn't NASA working on that, 60 years ago? So, Palantir, what they're able to figure out is we're not going to build everything. We're not going to think of everything. So with this whole Project Vista thing, that's where FedStart came from, is they're going to be able to get these companies to build programs, applications, software that is quote unquote needed, not only for Project Vista, but just for the Department of Defense overall, because these small companies are some of the most innovative, most important players in the world. I consider Palantir not necessarily a small company, but let's look at Anduril. Anduril is a small company compared to Palantir. It's one of the most creative, innovative companies in the world today. So if you're not an Anduril and you're some no name who's been working, with, let's just say you live in Boston and you have a little office that you've been working with for 5 years, and you finally, now you're going to spend 10 years trying to sell that product and program to the DoD, you're never going to get in there. And the technology that they might need for today, you created, but you're not able to get in there for another 5 years. So with Vista, and then Palantir is like, all right, we'll create FedStart. That will allow all these companies to come in. Palantir will get their cut through FedStart. They'll get approved through the DoD. They won't have to wait 18, 16, whatever it was, 8 years. They'll get in through 6 to 18 months. They'll get in. Palantir will then double dip because they'll get their money part. And then this is what people aren't realizing about space overall, and this is why I bring it up, is Apollo. Apollo is going to be the busiest software platform in the world, in my opinion. Every program that gets built on Gotham is going to have to be deployed via Apollo.
Why?
Why? Because that's how Palantir designed the software. And I'm sure some more technical people can, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I'm right, they could step in on this. But for Foundry, and this is the best way that I was able to pick it up, Foundry has extremely strict data access codes, right? And let's say you have access to a certain data set and I don't, and you make a change to that data set. If I'm looking at that data set the same time you are, but you have a higher level of access and you're allowed to either A, make changes, and I'm only allowed to look at it for whatever reason, Apollo is being used in the back of Foundry to send me the new data set.
Right.
I didn't touch it. I wasn't allowed to. You did. So Apollo is going to be used by Palantir to send all these new softwares, all these new programs and applications to everywhere in the world, whether you are in space, whether you are in the ocean in a submarine, or you are on a tank in Ukraine. Apollo is going to be the one thing that connects it all to anywhere. So that's why I think it's the biggest deal in terms of the platform itself is probably the most misunderstood, which makes sense because of how complex it is, but it's probably going to be the most valuable because of the importance behind it. If, for Palantir with Apollo and Meta Constellation, if you are an operator and I'll just use the recent attack, I'm pretty up to par on current events. Ukraine, they attacked Russia and they absolutely annihilated one of their warships. I don't know. This is a couple days ago.
I haven't heard of this, no.
It's pretty crazy. So they attacked one of their warships. And then yesterday, Russia launched the most intense rocket barrage in the entire war since it started. And Ukraine actually hit back late last night and is hitting Russian cities in Belgrade and another one that just got hit a couple minutes before we started. So it's really starting to escalate right now. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is if you're an operator, you're watching that port in Crimea and you're seeing the boat.
Right.
5 minutes later, it's gone. It's completely gone. You have to then send all that information to all of your allies within seconds.
There's you have to have the autonomous simultaneous deployment of that data at scale, and that's what Apollo's doing at the back end.
And it's coming from space because all the imagery is coming from space. So
because the only way you know that tank has been taken out is because the geospatial intelligence gives you the data, right?
Correct. So that's why space is going to be this massive, massive platform for them in 24. So obviously we do a ton of work with the Space Force. about a month ago or 2 months ago, Space Force actually gave this other company, I forgot the name of it, it's like QNTech, something like that, a $225 million 5-year contract for a proliferated space fighter warfighter architecture. So to me, I was just like, whoa, why didn't Palantir get that? That was a flag.
Right.
The reason behind it is this specific architecture that the Space Force is building is specifically designated towards satellites. So Palantir, they do work with satellites, but not exactly in this niche. What Palantir does, and this is what's going to come huge in 2024, because in the new defense budget that they passed, low Earth orbit, LEO, it is all over the place. They are spending billions of dollars in 24 on low Earth orbit.
What is low Earth orbit for those that don't know? And how can commercial companies use it or governments use low Earth orbit?
All right, so let's start with the government side, obviously, for myself. If you put in Palantir low Earth orbit, Palantir's resilient and effective space capabilities white paper is actually the first thing that pops up. So, yeah. So
I'll share it right now. I got it. Yeah, I got it.
So if you go here, it's all about the resiliency of fighting in space and space capabilities. So what Palantir does is they take satellites that are in low Earth orbit, they connect it to their platforms, which will be sucked in through Gotham, and they are able to then see what is going around in the low Earth orbit, and whatever the operator might need to do. If it's tracking a wildfire, they will then take Meta Constellation, they will take the satellites, they will then move them to the appropriate place, and they will take a look to see, where is this fire, where is it going, what do they need to stop it, how many water planes are they going to potentially need, who do they need to alert to evacuate. That's just from a commercial side. So, and then from a government standpoint side, obviously it's all over. You can say the enemy is moving, missiles over here, they're moving, squadrons over here, whatever it might be. So Palantir in space is a literally seamless integration. But if you also go to the Edge AI in space, which is a blog they put out last year.
Yeah, I remember reading this one. This was a while ago. Yeah.
Here
we go. I got it. This was the Satellogic partnership. I mean, I remember covering it, but it was almost 2 years ago. I don't even remember anything from this, but yeah, there's a lot of shit they're doing in space. April 2022.
Right. So right now, Palantir with the Satellogic, they have their own satellites in space because they want to be able to, at 24/7, 365, have access to whatever they need access to. So Correct. You're going to see more satellite launches from Palantir in 2024. And this is where the Edge AI comes to place. It's going to come through. It's going to be run through Meta Constellation, because that's where it's all coming through. And NVIDIA is actually the chip that powers the satellite, if I'm not mistaken. So even if you go in there, because there's another new Edge AI blog that came out a few months later than that, and they list NVIDIA, SpaceX. So they are connected to all of these companies that are all space related. And the thing is with space is it's such a massive part of the Army that it's almost impossible to say what's considered quote unquote low Earth orbit and then what's considered, space, because low Earth orbit is a part of space. And then above that is, just more space, if you will. So right. I actually have an article here that I was going to tweet, but I knew I was coming on here. I figured, let me share it share it with everybody while I'm on the stream with you. Here are the Army's. This is from December 6th. This is the Army's new planned electronic warfare signals program. So this is all the stuff coming up in 2024. And all the signals, they all start from space. So that's why it's so important to understand how big space is, because all the latency and all the signals are either coming from two areas, space or cables that are in the water.
Right.
So, and guess what? The new frontier is space. So that's where they're concentrating. So from this article that came out in December 6th, these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 programs that we have to look for in 2024. And they're not going to be complete in 2024. Some of the stuff's going to roll over to 2025, 2026. But these are the main programs that we need to look for. The Theater Signals Intelligence Program, which is going to provide tactical commanders at echelons above corps with forward deployable and remotely or even locally controlled signal intelligence systems and supporting potential and contingency operations. So it's all about getting the signals on time, understanding it, what's going to happen, how to disperse that to the correct commanders, and then moving around the battlefield. That's one. High altitude platform for deep sensing. Another new start, which is not even going to come place in fiscal 24. This is going to start in fiscal 25, is they're looking for either high altitude balloon, solar, and fixed wing aircraft, really looking at affordability and the balancing of low SWAP, high efficiency sensors to take advantage of HAP capabilities. Again, connecting sensors to, you're in the air. It's right. And then this is the one that really interests me, honestly, is the Modular Electronic Spectrum System. See, this program, which uses electromagnetic techniques to confuse and disrupt adversaries, is planned to start in new fiscal year 26. That's Brown Heron. For those that don't know, that fucking thing right there is Project Brown Heron, electromagnetic techniques to confuse and disrupt adversaries. If you look at my Twitter and you look up Project Brown Heron, that is exactly what Palantir was contracted to do, was to disrupt enemies with electromagnetic, waves. This is the kind of stuff that you're never going to hear Karp talk about on an earnings call.
This was $32.5 million they got in 2021. I forgot about this one.
This is Brown Heron. Yeah, Brown Heron is very, very secretive. It's now being called, I think now it's actually called the Envision Platform, ENVISION, Project Envision or Envision Platform.
And again, what exactly does Brown Heron do? How is it disrupting the adversary?
If you actually give me 1 second, I can let me pull up my little my little fact sheet. Give me 1 second.
Because I could imagine the U.S. government doesn't want to be talking about it too much, or Palantir. But I mean,
if they want to come and censor me, they can come. They know exactly where I am. I'd be more than happy to speak to them.
Electromagnetic waves, deep value in the chat. Yeah, this is. I think what you're saying here while you're pulling that up is that for those that are just joining, we're talking about Palantir's relationship to space going into 2024 and beyond. And really, there's a couple components to this. Meta Constellation, which is their premier product, they have a crap ton of patents on it in terms of using geospatial intelligence to connect data at the edge. On top of Apollo to deploy that data, those two things, I don't know what the revenue could materialize for that in 2024, but the opportunity to capture a significant portion of market share is there, especially with all these contracts Adam's talking about that are coming up. Those two things really haven't been talked about in the past couple of years. And so I think 2024 and beyond is the time for that vertical, which is the investment thesis for Palantir. There's healthcare, energy, pharmaceutical. There's so many different verticals to start showing some progress.
So this article that I'm looking at, it is from loading.
Someone said this is some tinfoil hat shit, and it's going to make us rich.
it is. So it's from 23, and this is what it says: is the contract, the modification, blah, 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 blah. The three mission areas that Palantir's data as a service continues to support include Space C2, NORAD's Joint All-Domain Command and Control Transformation. That shouldn't be a shocker. We'll get into JADC2 shortly. And Project Brown Heron, which is an electronic surveillance program initiated by the United States Air Force. That's it. They will not give any more information on it. So basically, it's a jamming, I'm pretty sure it's a jamming software. If you remember any of those old school movies or James Bond, where they do jammers of enemy equipment and communications, it's that, but in the digital age.
Right.
So
that's
why when people, they bitch to me and they complain, it's like, I don't care what you're doing with Apple or NVIDIA, you ain't doing this kind of stuff. This is the cool stuff that Palantir does. When Karp says it's fucking cool, this is it.
Right.
So Brown Heron will now be looking more at the Envision platform. So when you see that, you'll see Envision. The other main thing that I think people need to understand about 24 is, and I'm going to get to it in a second. I'm just going to finish rattling off these last three here, is the spectral situational awareness system, which is sensing and visualization that allows commanders to see their command post signature in real time. I believe, and obviously I'm not 100% right, I'm not confirmed, but I did post this the other day. The Army is looking for more mobile command posts. So what that means is if you are in the battlefield and you are a commander, usually you're in a tent, you're in a truck, you're in a stationary area, and that is your command post. So I asked the gentleman who is very well versed in the defense world, can SkyKit be quote unquote a short-term gap for a mobile command post? And what his explanation was, in theory, yes, it can be a very, very short-term solution. So it's just very interesting to see that Palantir, they provided the Army solutions today.
Right.
It might not necessarily be the correct or the best solution for tomorrow, but the fact is they're providing the answer today so that they're solving the problem for tomorrow, that when tomorrow comes, they're ready to deliver it. And that's the key thing. And this S2A2 is going to be very big. And then the last two things are the terrestrial layer system brigade combat team, which is 100% Lockheed, which is connected to Titan, which brings
We'll talk about Titan in a second, yeah.
Which brings us to our last thing, which is the electronic warfare planning management tool. Now, this thing is probably the most interesting thing that I've been looking to, because there's absolutely no information that I have been able to find of concrete evidence, but this is planned for something in fiscal year 24. And it's a tool used by commanders to visualize and control the electromagnetic spectrum. So I believe that if Palantir didn't develop that tool, it's probably built on Gotham in somewhere. And we're going to talk about that in a few, because the last part about this article is about Titan. And it's all about the progress on Titan. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, because I know we've spent so much, and there's a lot out there that you can just go to my Twitter, your Twitter.
We'll get into Titan in a second, but what you just said right there, these 6 contracts you mentioned, your argument is in 2024, Palantir has a good shot to potentially be in the running to win some of these contracts. That's your overall point.
I think we will be definitely in there to get something. I mean, brigade combat team, they're not going to see a penny of that. That's going to just, money revenue is just going to be indirectly tied to Lockheed. So like that money is just going to go to Lockheed, but maybe we get something through Lockheed on that. But this electronic warfare planning management tool, that's the most interesting one, in my opinion. I actually tweeted all at leadership the other week, because I was just like, fuck this. I can't find anything. I'm going straight to the big boys and seeing if they answer. And I knew I wasn't going to get an answer. But, electronic warfare, that automatically you have to think of, and I know I sound like a broken record, but the Program Executive Office of Intelligence, Electronic Warfare, and Sensors. That office is going to be fully run by Palantir by the end of the decade, in my honest opinion, because in 24, they're going to have Titan, which we'll talk about. But the main thing that I want to talk about with this program, and I'll hold for a bit, because I know you want to talk about Titan separately, is this office. But back to JADC2 and 24 as a whole, without talking about Titan specifically, is with JADC2, with the defense bill being passed, the JADC2 in the defense bill basically just said, we are going to create official roles and responsibilities, and we're going to enact protocol for these people. So if you go and you read the defense bill, by the time this bill has been signed into law, the acting Secretary of Defense and blah, 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 they give the title, will have 90 days to report to the Senate Armed Service Committee, whatever it might be, of the JADC2 effort, or whatever it might be. So the RNDF, the Reagan National Defense Forum, probably the best thing that ended Palantir for 2023 was CARP on that panel with Senator Joni Ernst. If you haven't seen that, I recommend everybody go watch that. CARP was definitely just slinging shots at some people on that panel. But when he talked, they listened. And Senator Joni Ernst, she is the leader of Indo-PACOM. So she's going to be really hammering home in 2024 JADC2. So in 2020, so they passed the defense bill, which has JADC2 in it. But on November 28th, the senator, she actually introduced the JADC2 Implementation Act, a completely separate thing strictly for JADC2. That is because it is going to be so important in 24 that these roles and these responsibilities are taken seriously and defined. Because if you remember when we first spoke on our first stream, the JADC2 vision was just kind of there. There was no, if you remember, I said it, there was no, point of contact. It kind of
was very abstract.
Yes, it was just people in the division saying, yeah, we'll take care of it. But no one was like, well, is it your responsibility? Now they said, we're done. We're putting it in place. We're giving defined roles. You're going to have responsibility that you must come to Congress, report your findings. We'll give our input and then take it from there. No more flowing in the wind. It is serious time now. That's why this Army version of 23, which I say every day is a day closer. The JADC2 vision is going to make it become a reality. And it's because of this defense bill and the Senator's Implementation Act.
Let me ask you this question about the defense bill, because you've done seemingly a decent amount of research on it, and you might not even have the answer to this, because I don't know if anyone in the world has the answer to this, but do you have any sense of how much they're going to allocate from that $886 billion to software, or is it kind of still a mystery?
So that's a really good question. And if you remember, we did on the stream, they laid out the money that was coming out for it. So believe it or not, there was actually a last minute 10 billion added to the defense bill. It was supposed to be 876 billion. And then magically the last 10 seconds, it turns to 886 billion. I don't know where they
out
get
of thin air, they just printed it. So
literally, that's what I think they literally just said. Just print another 10 bill in the back and we'll add it in here. So, with the defense bill, and I'm more than happy to share this article, is, one website's put out a really good, basic overview of what's going on. So if you remember, artificial intelligence is mentioned 192 times in the entire world. So, but it's basic stuff, basically saying, the United States Air Force 4th Airborne Division with the blah, blah, blah will use artificial intelligence. And then you'll have some stuff later that will have dollars allocated to that. It's very hard to say what exactly is going to be spent, because if you do remember, in the bill itself, they only allocated only $1.8 billion for artificial intelligence. That's not a lot. But they allocated $18 billion for science and research. Artificial intelligence, science and research, it kind of overlaps. So it's going to be really hard to say. But one of the cool things is, and this is why it's very hard to decipher and try to pinpoint exactly the exact dollar amount that's coming, because like I said, the last second, they just added $10 billion. Where the fuck is that coming from? You can't just...
So you don't have a number on where it's going to software. It's probably going to be much lower than all of us think, but it's increasing, which is your point, because they keep mentioning AI, which is software at the end of the day.
It's going to be billions and billions of dollars. So I'm trying to look for my notes right now, actually, because artificial intelligence was only for 1.4 billion, like I said, but they had another 4 or 5. I could be wrong, but I remember they had a couple $1 billion just in low Earth orbit. So, who's getting that money? And if it's low Earth orbit and it's connected to Palantir, well, it's got to be AI. It's such a loose term, in my opinion. You can't look at the bill and be like, they're spending 1.5 billion on artificial intelligence. Palantir is going to get 300 mil of that. Well, no, because there's going to be 50, 60, 70, 108 billion dollars spent for artificial intelligence just from a different line item, if that makes sense.
Correct. Right.
So it's really hard to say
Okay.
What's
No. That makes a lot of sense. And the question just becomes, is Palantir going to be able to capture a decent amount of that going into 2024? Let's get into Titan, because I want to give an update to people on that. Titan is a $1.5 billion contract over 5 years that you have publicly said on our last stream that if Palantir doesn't get it, something's really wrong. They announced back in November that it's not going to be announced at the end of 2023, which we all expected, even though they said it would. It's going to happen in 2024. What are your updated thoughts on that contract, Palantir competing with Raytheon, Palantir's collaboration with Anduril, and how likely we are to get the contract?
100%. If I had to put my money down right now, that's how confident I am. With Shyam mentioning on the earnings call Titan by name, he mentioned Northrop by name. And for those that don't follow me, I put it out there about a week ago. There is 2 variations of Titan. There is an advanced variation, which is Northrop that will be involved. And then there's the basic variation, which is Palantir, Anduril, and I'm sure Northrop as well. So the reason why I think it's pretty much, I don't want to say locked, because there always can be a change, is the mention of Northrop and Titan by name on the earnings call. They have given Titan updates along the way this year, and there has been no update from Raytheon. I looked at Raytheon's Q3 earnings call, no mention. I saw 0 update of it. I am going to assume that the reason why this was delayed is they were causing a bitch fit, and they said to them, that's not fair, and like Carpus said to us, go, give them 6 months, give them a year. They will not build what we will build. And I think that is what's happening. Just if I had
and just to speak on that real quick, that is, I think, the best part of investing in a company like Palantir, because everyone, that ticker symbol U video came out that said, he doesn't have a pricing strategy and they don't know how to. And my thing is, like, I want to invest in technology companies that can massively grow, and to massively grow, you've got to have products that are absolutely cutting edge, generational, which means the CEO theoretically shouldn't give a shit about you paying for it. If he knows it's so good, you're going to pay for it. And that really matters in the government space, because they don't want to pay for anything for many years until they finally have to. And when they have to, then you get a lot of revenue.
Right. And we saw when they released the Vantage information, they saved them over $3 billion.
Yep.
That's why they got the extra 10. They got 3 from there, and they said print 7 in the back. So that is why it's so big, and it takes time. So with SOCOM, if you saw, I posted that YouTube video about 3 weeks ago of the platform that I think they built with Palantir. SOCOM, they got $400 million contract from SOCOM like in June. And the day or two before that, I literally tweeted about SOCOM saying they're going to get a ton of money from SOCOM. And the day after, 400. They can get $1 billion from SOCOM next year. It's not out of the equation. Everyone needs to wake up. $886 billion. Palantir is going to get a fair share of that. That's just the Department of Defense. That doesn't include the Department of Health, the Department of Homeland Security. It is enormous, the amount of pie that Carp is talking about. So with Titan, that is why it is an absolute must win for them. If they do not win Titan, they're not going to get all the little, call it indirect revenue streams that would have come from Titan. So
do you think they could split it with Raytheon? Or
before they made that article about one vendor, I said I wouldn't be surprised if they wound up splitting it. Now, absolutely not. It looks like it's sole vendor, one company plus Northrop, because Northrop is developing the space one, which is the advanced portion. And this goes back to why I said space is the most important part for them, because it's all connected from from space. So when they win Titan, the avalanche of money is going to catapult them to another echelon. It might not happen in fiscal year 24. It might not happen till mid 25. But you have to understand that Titan is going to bring so much money to them, because it's going to allow them so many avenues to sell to the Department of Defense. So with Titan, they're going to be connected to thousands of weapon systems and vehicles and soldiers. So it's just going to create so much more, quote unquote, usage for Palantir. And you were the first one that dug it up in the 10Q. They made a 10-year, $2 billion compute deal. Why? Because they know they're going to be using a shit ton of more compute power over the next decade. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that get increased in value next quarter. Because if Palantir, let's just use the three main platforms, Gotham, Apollo, and Foundry. Let's just use those. If those three platforms are going to be increased usage, let's just go by 30% in the next, they're going to have to spend. And that means those people are spending with Palantir to use the platform. So that's kind of why. And I think 2024, my secret commercial, prediction.
Oh, let's go into that. All right. So let's transition to that. So kind of give me the rundown of what you think is happening for commercial. So like the bear case right now is commercials growing at 30% US growth, which is awesome, but internationally it's trash. Overall 17% year-over-year growth. We don't really have a great conversion on the boot camps yet, not that we know of. Customer count has been stagnant, 8% quarter over quarter. How does commercial change? I guess give me the bull case, bear case for you in 2024.
Well, the bear case, in my honest opinion, would be if growth maintains how it is now, even if it continues growing at this, 2025. I don't think that's justifiable to be the multiple that we all want. I think we need to get back to 35, 40, and it will happen, in my opinion. That would be the bear case. And the bull case would be, they convert, 30, 40, 50% of these AIP contracts. They start extracting value from them immediately, and they can start hitting their expand phase quicker. That's the other main thing is, if it took them 18 months to acquire, now it's down to 5 days, they can quote unquote hit the expand and scale phase within 18 months. So that's really it. But my big thing for 24 from a commercial side, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people, is, and I'm going to divide it up into two, outside the US and inside the US. And I'll start with outside the US. Asia. Specifically Taiwan. And I'm not even talking on the defense side.
Talk to me. All right, talk to me.
And I think a lot of people don't realize this, and I think a lot of people are going to research this after we're done here today, is the Athinia platform. Now, I don't know, and many people are probably saying, what the hell is he talking about? So Palantir built on Foundry Athinia, which is a platform for semiconductors. If you pull up the Athinia page, it talks about the importance of semiconductors, the supply chain. Then it talks about building with the ontology developer, software engineer kit, whatever it might be. So, this
was the Merck KGA one. I remember December 2021, this one came out, and no one thought much of it because we didn't think that much about semiconductors or Taiwan and China. Now everyone's thinking about semiconductors.
Correct. So I have a feeling it's going to be a massive, massive market for them in 24 is Athinia platform. One of the gentlemen that I follow or speak with on Twitter, I will leave his name out for security reasons because I'm convinced he's 007 CIA. He's probably watching me now. But we speak very, very frequently. And the head of Palantir Asia, and you guys can Google his name. His name is Barrett Brown. He's not Asian, but he actually opened up a Palantir office in Taipei about 2 years ago. But more importantly, he was in Taipei yesterday.
How do you know this? LinkedIn?
No, I'm hoping my source is right. That's why he was tracking.
Dude, this is why this stock is gonna make us all rich, because no random people are spending their time getting sources trying to figure out this shit in the retail community. Other than
they were, if you must know, my very good fellow investor, he was tracking his plane. So.
Which is all public data. That's not, that's all out there.
Right. Just like patents are public data. You just have to know where to look. So I really think from a commercial side, I think people are going to be very surprised with semiconductors, with Athinia. There you go. It was deep value there.
Oh, deep value. Of course, it was deep value. So, what do you think Athenia is gonna? Do you think there's gonna be more semiconductor disruption that's happening throughout supply chains, and that's where Athenia could pick up some contracts in Asia?
Yeah, well, I think Athenia is just going to be massive in Asia, just specifically because of Taiwan. But I'm thinking Athenia overall on a global scale, just because you saw it at it was only a couple months ago, I think, but the Biden administration, they gave Intel that massive tax rebate thing for that huge foundry chips program that Intel was building stateside. So,
Right.
And they work with Intel, Palantir. So, and I think now, especially the last 5 years, from a intelligence community standpoint, microchips and semiconductors are just as lethal as nuclear weapons and ICBMs. So Palantir is now going to take the step in being a leader in ensuring, okay, is our semiconductor supply chain safe? What happens if we get, like we said, a hurricane comes or a typhoon destroys Taiwan? Meta Constellation is going to be looking up over there. You're going to have to be like, oh my God, we have to move their entire supply chain to Laos, Vietnam, whatever it might be. So that's why I think Athenia and semiconductors, I think, is going to be the biggest surprise. I know everybody's all big on AIP. Again, it's just a part of Foundry. So I think the Athinia platform is really going to start to take off in 24, specifically in Asia, Taiwan specifically. I think just from an overall U.S. commercial, I think we're going to still continue penetrating. We're going to continue growing. Our top 20 clients at the last Q3, I think they did 53 million in the quarter, if I'm not mistaken. That number will grow. Will it get to 100 million over time? Yes. This quarter, probably not. The only way that will happen in an instant will be through a Uncle Sam contract.
Yeah.
I think the commercial side is in a very, very good place.
So you said you had one international, which was Athenia. What was the one domestic?
I think Athenia combine international and domestically. I still think Apollo is going to be the most important program of the main three, if you will, because Apollo is just going to be used in everyday shape and form from a defense side or from a commercial side. Because if you are, I'm trying to think off the top. If you're working for Morgan Stanley, for example, we saw with that foundry, they spent a year getting that down. So if Morgan Stanley has to push, a new software update because the EU makes a new banking regulation, they'll send the software, they'll deploy it via Apollo in the EU offices, and nobody will miss a beat. So, I think that would be my big thing. I think the commercial side, I would love for them to close Berkshire, obviously, because that opens the door to so many enterprises in the U.S. I just think they need to continue developing relationships, which they're doing. I would like to see Thiel, to be honest, a little bit more out there on a commercial side.
He's been gone for about 2 years. He hasn't talked about Palantir. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you saw him in the HD Hyundai deal. He did make that. That was in 21. I know he's not involved on a quote unquote day to day, but I would very much like to see him be a little bit more involved, especially on bigger deals, whether it is in a government or in a commercial space, because I think as an investor, and you might feel differently than me, seeing his face for whatever reason just reassures me.
Dude, he's part of the reason a lot of average people bought. They're like, oh, it's Peter Thiel's company. He can't lose. I mean, that's
correct.
The basic thesis a lot of people have. Yeah.
It reassures me that, hey, this guy's involved. He cares. He wants the company to grow. He wants the company to succeed. And I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. Is it going to happen? Maybe he shows his face once. Maybe he doesn't show his face at all. He can do whatever the hell he wants, obviously. But, it's an election year. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how the stock market reacts after such a successful 23, after such a poor 22. And with an election year, it's usually relatively good. The incumbent wants people to vote for him because they're making money in the market. But, we'll see. I'd like to see Palantir just close more commercial clients, keep that customer growth going, get back to, 30, 40 would be obviously the ideal. 50 would be of revenue growth. It's going to happen, but I think after Q1 of 24, because once Titan is finally awarded, I think that is when you're going to see the avalanche of defense and government money come in, because Linchpin is connected to Titan, and Linchpin is all about connecting sensors.
Right. Let me ask you this question real quick, going back to Taiwan. Xi Jinping met with Biden like a month ago. They cleaned up California for them to meet. And then a month later, Xi Jinping's basically saying we're going to reunite with Taiwan, which means, we're going to do what we need to do to pull off a Russia-Ukraine type of situation. Do you think Palantir is being, and Palantir and Karp on a Fox Business interview 2 weeks ago, he was asked about this in the partnership with Fujitsu in Japan. And he basically said, we can't really discuss these things, but we are collaborating with Japanese military officials and just talking to them about a variety of things that are going on. From your perspective, how deep is Palantir in talks with Taiwan officials, Japanese officials, Asian officials writ large about a potential invasion? And do you think, they're a company that knows what's going to happen. They've historically been correct. Do you think they're at least preparing for, if that happens, how the world's going to react and what they're going to need to do to help the world?
Yeah, that's partially why they built Athinia, is because they're afraid that China doesn't want to play nice in the sandbox, and they never play nice in the sandbox. And they're going to say it's time, and they're going to grab them, and they're going to say no more semiconductors for the United States. So I would, obviously, I would love to be a fly in the room with any call that Karp is on. It's pure speculation on my point. I'm going to assume Karp, Aki John, Wendy, all the top tier Palantir people, they are speaking with their counterpoints in Asia as well as defense officials. I don't know if they're quote unquote outright allowed to go to, the defense minister of Taiwan and say, hey, buddy, you got to watch out. China's, getting ready to move, X, Y, and Z ship on your shores. I don't know if they're allowed to legally say that outright, because if China's considering them their own territory, it's a whole bunch of legal mumbo jumbo. Right. I think they're definitely forecasting to them as much as they can of like, hey, be careful, this is coming. There's a reason why when that Gotham video came out, they were using Taiwan and the China Sea. And if you read the defense bill, and specifically the senators, JADC 2 Implementation Act, it's all about Indo-Pacific and China. It has really nothing to do with Europe, Russia. They are way more concerned with China because of China's technological capabilities, North Korea's increase in their ballistic program, and then, of course, with how close you have Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan all close to these adversaries, it's a very, very scary, fragile, geopolitical situation. So they have to be very careful how they forecast, because, they have to play nice in the sandbox for the United States government. They have to play nice in the sandbox to the SEC. They have to play nice in the sandbox to us investors. And then they have to say, I don't give a shit about any of that. I want you to be up and living in the world tomorrow because we care for you. We want the good guys to win. So all that goes out the window. So they're always, trending such a thin tightrope, which is why Karp, you will never hear him mention this stuff. Brown Heron, Overmatch, ABMS, it will never be mentioned from his mouth. He can't. So it's a really, really scary situation, because if China does take it, and they said the American government and the DoD specifically, they have positioned their armed forces to quote unquote be ready for China to take Taiwan as early as 2025. Right. They don't think it's going to happen until 2027, but they are prepared that it could happen within, in theory, the next 367 days. That's a very scary thought. And they said to them, and this is not a shocker, and I know I'm not in the meetings. I know Biden doesn't call me and ask for my opinion, and I know Z doesn't give a fuck what I have to say. He probably wants to kill me.
Dude, I'm like never visiting China because I've said things publicly about them. I'm so scared if I visit, they'll have a database on me and they'll fucking kill me.
Trust me, I'm never going to that fucking country. Between them and George Soros, I'd be killed in a heartbeat. China, if they go and they make a move for Taiwan, whether that is through diplomacy efforts or military tactics, the U.S. isn't just going to roll over and say, okay, you could take it. So China basically just said to them, I am taking this You can either accept it as diplomacy or we can go to a war. And I think we're going to have a full-scale war in the South China Sea and the Indo-Pacific. Maybe. I would hope not. Or are we probably going to have a typical United States 20th century proxy war where we're fighting China on some other nation's ground with all these little proxy battles going on? That's probably more likely to happen. But realistically speaking, and in my military mind, and I don't think I'm a military genius, I don't think I have some knowledge, I don't have the most, I'm this close to China. I mean, Taiwan, if I'm China. If I want it, I'm just going to steamroll my way over there, and I'm just going to land as many ships as I can. I'm going to air raid all over, and anybody that's coming to try and stop me, I will just bomb you out in the ocean.
Do you think if China invades Taiwan and Taiwan doesn't put up a fight, it's not like China's just going to kill all the Taiwanese people? That's not their goal, unless they fight back at them. If they willingly give up the land, China would just be like, all right, you're part of us now.
I have no idea. That is
just like, how the fuck are they even like? What?
You're 100% right in my opinion. They don't want hundreds of thousands of people dead on the street that they have to then come clean up. They don't want that. They just want the semiconductors. They want that because that's what's going to power their military. They want those chips. They want and if you kill all the people that are making them, you're screwed. Everyone knows. Like for me, the old adage, you get what you pay for. You could buy something that was made in China for $10 and will work for a week and then break. Or you could buy something that was $100 and it will last 2-3 years. Like China, they need the land, they need the facilities, and they need the human. That's the key thing. Like I don't think like Russia, in my opinion, and if it was me, if I was Z, I would be more along like Putin. I would say, fuck them. I'll just obliterate the island, try to keep as much as I can up standing so I don't have a lot to rebuild, keep the smartest people I can alive, and then it's mine. But with Russia, they're more along the lines of, I don't care. They try to take, if you remember the first day of the war, they had tanks in Kiev. They did not want to destroy the city because their mentality is, I don't want to come in and spend $500 billion rebuilding a whole city I destroyed. They tried to kill Zelensky the first day with a secret operation because they didn't want to blow up Kiev. And that's why Kiev, if you've seen, it hasn't really had a lot of damage. Other parts of Ukraine disintegrated, just like parts of Gaza, because they know the land and the people, and not to say this is bad, is not the objective of the war. Right. It is, in China's case, it is securing the supply chain of semiconductors and those chips to power the military. So I don't think they would want to do that. I don't think they give a shit because realistically speaking, let's be real, there's two global superpowers in the world, the US and China. And if they're going to come head to head on a full-on war, whether that's in the Indo-Pacific, in the South China Sea, or even fought on Taiwan, no one's winning that war at the end of the day because China's not going to get what they want. The US isn't going to get what they want. Innocent people are just going to die. And you're just going to be at a standstill, in my opinion.
Well, what is your argument to people that are saying China's never going to invade Taiwan? You're fear-mongering. You just want Palantir to make money off of war. This is not going to happen. Stop scaring
people. The Russians. Why? I will say this, and I said this to one of my best friends in my own personal life, and a lot of people, especially my age, and you're close to my age as well, and this is going to hit you hard. Ever since the end of the Cold War, essentially, the United States has not really been, quote unquote, in a war. So for people my age and younger like you, or give or take a year, when they were growing up and living in the United States, our parents were constantly living in a world at war. Cold War, Korean War, Vietnam, World War II. The United States, since its inception, has always been at war. And there is always war on the planet.
That's also why we have such a big defense bill, because we've known what it takes to maintain our freedoms, right?
You are here today because somebody 5,000 years ago killed someone else, and then that person said, oh, we need to create a steel shield to protect us from a spear. And then that turned into, It's all about defense and security. So the United States is going to spend as much money as they think they need to ensure that what happened in Israel, Mexico, or Canada does not happen to us. Is that likely to ever happen? Definitely not, because we can wipe those countries off the face of the earth within 15 minutes, and they're not going to win a war with us. So with China, as it faces Taiwan, yes, they can go in there and they can easily take over the country if they really wanted to, blood or no blood. They just have to overrun the country, which is the one thing that I'm going to leave you off on, which is very interesting. And I'll fill this back to the point about us growing up. This year, there was a 1,300% increase in Chinese espionage, all for IP, trade secrets. They want what we have.
Because there was a balloon, and it was nobody's birthday that day.
When we were watching that balloon, for the record, we could have shot that thing down, but we didn't want to, because if there's one thing we're better at than anybody else other than building, we're better at spying than everybody else too. So with related to that, if China says, if Xi wakes up one day and says, I want it, I'm taking it, we need it for our national security, blood or no blood, someone's going to have to defend the people of Taiwan. Is it going to be the United States? Is it going to be Canada, Australia? I don't know. Or the Taiwanese people. If it's not us and our allies, they're gone. They lost.
Right. So
what people don't need to realize is, since this inception of the 80s, other than really when we invaded Afghanistan, and me and you were very young at the time, our parents were old enough, we've been living relatively in a world full of peace until the breakout of war in Ukraine. So people don't understand, and maybe this is because I just read up on it. My grandfather was in the army. Like, I just get it, is there's bad people in the world that have way different lines of thought than you and I, and they don't care. And they will do whatever they think is necessary to achieve their goals. And if that means putting a bullet in the back of my head, they will do that. There is a reason why we have to have the bigger, badder, best military, because we have to prevent those guys from winning. Right. So for anybody that thinks Palantir shareholders are just a bunch of warmongers, you're wrong.
You're taking your freedoms for granted. That's number one.
Correct. That's what it is. Because if you go back and you ask your parents, what was it like living in the 90s? They're going to say, well, it was pretty interesting times. There was an economic boom. There wasn't really a lot of war because, the USSR collapses, and then, it's really nothing. And then 9/11 hits. So, and then 9/11 hits, and it's really more about no war we just invaded Afghanistan. So, and it's just very, there's no social media. The media landscape was different. Now everything is out in the open. You can live stream from your phone, on the ground, missiles being thrown at you from Gaza, from Russia, wherever it might be. So it is important to build these things as a mate to protect yourself. And that's why CARP is so big on no pausing. If we don't build it, our enemy will, and they will take us out. So for all you climate activist people out there, I didn't want to go there, but it came in my head. Shut the fuck up. You think Z cares about climate change? The guy came from nothing. When you're a dictator of a country and your whole point is to hold on to power and make your country grow economically, you don't care about carbon emissions. And the second thing to you climate activists, I'm sorry, I had to do this now.
No, do it, dude. You're right.
Jeans. You wear jeans? It's like the least climate friendly apparel clothing you can wear. The amount of cotton needed to make jeans and then the water to clean the jeans, horrible for the environment. So do me a favor, go wear some bullshit environment-friendly clothes, get your ass in a dirty river or lake, and then tell me that you really care about cleaning up the environment instead of protesting nonsense. Sorry, I had to do that. But that is...
Having said that, what were your thoughts? Well, no, I agree with you 1,000%. I mean, the Greta Thunbergs of the world have influenced people to think that if you stand in front of a car, you're going to stop carbon emissions. Meanwhile, you're on a plane or a boat going to conferences about climate change.
It's insanity. Look,
it's actual insanity. What were your thoughts on the protesters in the London office 2 weeks ago protesting about the NHS deal and Israel and all that stuff?
I mean, let's play a little scenario game real quickly. You're a patient. I'm a doctor. You come into my office because I have blood results for you. Amit, you look good, bro. Everything looks good. I can't tell you if there's anything wrong. You opted not to share your results with me. Good luck. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. Like, this is what I can understand. People are very concerned about data security and data privacy, and they have every right to. But everyone needs to take a deep breath and relax and see what they're actually doing. When you tweet your own personal thoughts and you put it on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Facebook, Instagram, it's out there already. It does not matter. Your medical history, which is already in the system of United Healthcare, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Where is their protest? Where is the protest for Meta, who has done nothing but destroyed the mental health of hundreds of thousands of people? Where's their protest? So
No, yeah, you're making the right point. These protesters are standing in front of Palantir's office that is trying to redo an entire system that has been fucked for 30 years, but they're not protesting Facebook that has monopolized your data and sold it to advertisers. They're not protesting Google that is paying $5 billion for a consumer settlement fine of illegally tracking your cookies and not the chocolate chip ones. Like, I mean, this is absurd that we're not protesting these consumer internet companies that have frankly done a lot of bad things, but we're protesting Palantir because Donald Trump.
I'd like to think a lot of it really just comes from bullshit politics, and it will die down in the next 2-3 years, because as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the average person will be more inept, be like, oh, I know that company. I know that. I think that will help a little bit,
Right.
But they need to open up. I say it every couple months. It's in the fucking S1, the goddamn first page. They don't mind sell or steal your data. They don't care if you have diabetes or if you had to get stitches in your arm last year. What are they going to do with that? Absolutely nothing. So they're only hurting themselves by doing this protest and opting out of the data, because the main thing for Palantir and Palantir Healthcare overall is the more data they get, whether that is from an actual, one-on-one primary care physician and their patient, like the little scenario you and I just did, or if it's a patient that's going through chemo, is all this data is going to not be accessed by Palantir or by me or you. It's only accessed by those that have the permissions to access it, and they're going to use this data to help you get healthy or to help you find better drugs. Like, it has nothing to do with to improve their bottom line. Palantir is the one company in the world that loves to give their stuff for free.
Yeah, and that's the sad part. I mean, that's from the business community. It's the sad part in terms of not understanding the basic freemium strategy, and then from the activist types that have literally nothing better to do than stand in front of an office where the employees aren't even there because they went home on December 18th and protest. I genuinely feel bad for those people, because I'm just like, so you've decided nothing was more important in your life today that you could do for the fate of humanity, for your own personal growth, than hold up a sign and say Palantir's. It's sad. And I do think that whole DEI woke movement is starting to die down, because a lot of people are just getting tired of this shit. And if it does die down over the next couple of years, I think Palantir is going to capitalize on it.
Look, it can die down. It can keep going the rate it is. I personally think Palantir will do whatever they need to do. I think there is a large chunk of people that have a very similar mindset, like you and I, that look at Palantir and say, this is the company for me. Right. Whereas 5-10 years ago, maybe they didn't want to do it. They didn't know about Palantir, but now that it's a little bit more open out there, it's very mission focused. It's I mean, in the past couple of years, patriotism has been seen as a bad thing. Oh, I'm sorry, buddy, but there's a reason why all these migrants are coming to the United States. It's because it is the best place in the world to live. And if you don't like that, leave.
It's almost like a crime to say that to your friends. Like, if I went to my friend group from high school and I was like, the United States is fucking awesome, they would look at me I'm like, we all went to public school in the United States. Like, we turned out okay, right? Like, the United States is not that bad, but it's tough. It's tough to deal with that in the political climate we're in.
Every country has their problems. Everyone, I can guarantee you that, and I can assure you, the United States is the best place in the world. There is nowhere else in the world where you want to be gay, be gay. You want to be trans?
I mean, the queers for Palestine is the most hilarious meme of 2023.
Don't get me started.
We don't have to get started on that, but they would chop your head off if you were queer in Palestine. So you can be queer in Palestine in the West, but
get your head chopped off. If I went to Palestine, they don't like Americans. Like, it's very simple. Like, we don't need to get too political on that, but
this was really good. For those that are just here, we talked about Palantir in space for about 30 minutes. That was a really big part. We talked about government spending, Titan, commercial growth, the Athinia platform, Taiwan, a lot of different topics. They're all in the chapters. Everyone can check it out. We're getting towards the end. Any last thoughts you want to say about 2024 in general that you have expectations for, and anything that we didn't talk about that you think is worth mentioning going into 2024?
Well, the one thing that I want to mention that I don't think we touched up on is I just want to bring up real quickly the Chief Digital Artificial Intelligence Office. That's a very, very important office for Palantir. Obviously, we poached Greg Little, who ran that office last year. But the reason why I want to bring it up is everybody that is part of this leadership team, and there's two quote unquote leaders, and then there's these deputies.
And what is this office called again?
The Chief Digital Artificial Intelligence Office. CDA.
And this is part of the U.S. government?
Yes, it's a new office that was set up a couple years ago, actually. I think 2020 or 2021. CDAO. Okay. It's basically the future of the Army, because it's all about artificial intelligence. That's why I also wanted to talk about my favorite office, the Intelligence, Electronic Warfare, and Sensor Office. Is the CDAO is going to be a massive part of the Army and the DoD going forward. But the main guy I wanted to talk about was the deputy chief for this office, and his name is Joe Larson. For algorithm, and his title is the Deputy Chief Department Artificial Intelligence Officer for algorithmic warfare. That's Maven. So whenever time you see algorithm warfare, that's Maven. So this guy, I just want people to understand, he worked at Palantir for 4 years before he left to go work at the Department of Defense.
What's his name?
Joe Larson. And if you put him in LinkedIn, he worked in Palantir for 4 years. And his 4 years at Palantir was about AI policy and strategy. So it's all about how to adopt the AI and what policy they need to implement to make sure the AI is run ethically. Because that's the big thing with Palantir, is they talk about how important it is that the AI remains in ethics, in legal forms. If you go down, you can see he also joined Anduril for a short time as well. And that's the JADC2 under. And then you'll see the AI policy in 2012. So he's been there for 4 years. So this is the most direct link that we have currently in the leadership office is Joe Larson, because he physically worked at Palantir. But you see, he's worked on programs like Maven and stuff. So Maven, and the one thing I wanted to touch up on just to end this stuff is, Maven, they are being used in a multiple variety of ways. So Maven, you're going to see a lot of Maven be used in the Army and the Navy, but Five Eyes and AUKUS, those are the last two things I want to talk about, is the Five Eyes Alliance and the AUKUS Alliance. And Deep Value, probably the best follow for any of the Five Eyes and the AUKUS stuff, is Five Eyes Alliance is getting very, very big. So the Five Eyes Alliance, it is the US, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, and I believe Japan, I think, is the fifth one. But they're potentially growing that into including South Korea. And AUKUS is Australia, United Kingdom, Australia, United Kingdom, US, and they're talking about adding New Zealand and Canada to those alliances. So those are huge, because Palantir, algorithmic warfare, Maven is going to be used by these alliances. So one of the last things I just want to touch about is I looked up earlier in the year the Navy fiscal 24 budget, and I didn't see anything of it when the actual defense budget was put. But at the very, very bottom of the Navy defense budget, and this came out in March, you're going to love this. They have at an asterisk. They refuse to put the dollar amount. Cosmos, Minotaur, and Maven are details held at a higher classification. So Cosmos and Minotaur might not sound familiar to you. Those are programs built on top of Maven. So Maven is just going to be fucking huge all over the world. Five Eyes Alliance, the AUKUS Alliance, Maven, algorithmic warfare, and this Joe Larson guy, he was AI policy. So he's now implementing the policy for the Department of Defense. So he built it with Palantir, and now he's going to take that policy and implement it in the DoD.
So Joe Larson worked at Palantir for 4 years. Now he's the head of the Chief Digital and AI Office, which they opened up a year ago. And as a result of that, the variety of programs stemming from Project Maven, which Palantir took when Google didn't want to take it, $229 million contract a couple years ago, is now implementing things like Five Eyes, which is US.
So and the alliances are separate.
Right. And different alliances that are going to be exporting all these products across the entire world. And you're saying Joe Larson is the one in charge of actually overseeing the implementation of this stuff via Project Maven.
That's part of his job title. Yes. So with Maven is going to be massive. So now we're starting to see stuff built on top of Maven or in conjunction with Maven. So his job is going to be to take Maven and send it to, let's say, the United Kingdom and be like, all right, here's the Maven program. What do you need to do for this on the Royal Marines or the Royal Navy? And then so that's where it's coming. So that's why it's going to be big. And with that gentleman being a direct link into Palantir, and then obviously with Greg Little coming to Palantir, this office is going to be very, very much Palantir. And that's why the program executive office, now this is separate, the project manager of the intelligence system and analytic office from that intelligence, electronic warfare, and sensor office, everything Palantir does in 24 is going to fall under this program, this project manager ISA. So Titan, all of it's under that. The Army data platform, it's going to all be under this project management. And just to give you an idea, the project manager of intelligence systems and analytics is responsible for critical Army Intelligence Foundation modernization initiatives. Specific projects include the Titan program, the Intelligence Applications Program, the Army Intel Data Platform, that's Vantage, Project Linchpin, which is going to come after Titan's awarded, the Joint Tactical Terminal, the Next Generation, and the Current Force Distributed Common Ground System Army. That's DGCSA. That's the $820 million contract they got in 21. So this one office in this project in intelligence electronic warfare systems is going to be all basically Palantir. And it's going to be extremely connected to the CDAO. So these are like the two offices that I'm really following in 24. It's going to be extremely, extremely busy, especially once they get Titan, because it's going to be like super quick what comes out after that.
And your argument is because the office is filled with a lot of these Palantir alumni, when they think of who who can we procure software from to build even more things, they're going to think Palantir, even if it's not guaranteed that Palantir will get those deals.
Correct. Right. That's why they have Greg Little there. That's why they are making moves in there. They actually have a whole defense business advisory board. And if I'm not
the federal advisory board. Yeah.
Yes. And if I'm not mistaken, McRaven, whatever his name is, McKay, I forgot the very high, he's a member of it. So they're very, very lockstep with the Department of Defense and military. So
I think this has been your whole point for a while now, that the government business is not a drag. It is the moat of Palantir.
Correct.
Part of the moat, at least.
Correct. And it's actually funny because the other day I was just bored and I was just looking through random patents and I just clicked a random one from 2022. And it was all about network cybersecurity and how to prevent a hack. And it was ridiculous. I'm like way above my technique. I was saying to myself, and I'm like, this is why Microsoft can't get it. They're constantly being hacked and breached. This company has developed software so advanced, so complex that if you try to hack it, it's impossible. And the IL-6, this is the main thing. I think this is the year where IL6 really starts to bear fruit, because when you are an IL6 and then you're going through FedStart, the government is going to say, this company is legit. We trust Palantir. We gave them IL6. They're vetted, blah, 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 blah. And it's just going to be this massive domino, and it's going to be this massive revenue stream of companies coming in through FedStart. That was their Project Vista answer. And everyone's going to be happy.
This is very, very exciting. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy the stream. Thank you, 294 people, for being here. We're coming on to the end of this 90-minute stream. All the chapters are in the description. We talked about a lot of stuff. This is one that I would listen to, and hell, even listen to it again, because there's a lot of good stuff. Adam, you absolutely killed it. His Twitter is in the description. For those people that don't know Adam, I think, you know, he's a gem of the community. He's someone who, as he just said, when he's bored, he's researching Palantir patents. I mean, this guy knows more about the upcoming government contracts and Palantir's ability to really capture a lot of government market share, I think, better than just anyone in the community, given the research that he does.
Don't do it alone. I shout out to the fellowship. I want everybody join the Discord. It's free. Got great info there. Everything is tagged. So if you just need to get quick info or Palantir tweets, it's all connected. You don't need to search anywhere, all in the Discord. And everybody else that researches, and appreciate everybody that's followed, supported me throughout the past year and a half. And 24 is going to be a good year. And once we get Titan, a lot of cool, more secret stuff to look for that I will have no idea about maybe for 6 months. But JADC2 Industry Day, January 16th, if I'm not mistaken. So we got a lot of stuff coming right off the bat. You know, JADC2, I'm praying, and I'll leave it off on this one, that they announce Titan as the winner at that JADC2 Industry Day. I just think that would be so awesome. It's like you have all these leaders there, and they end the conference, like, and the winner is Palantir. And then it's just like you watch Raytheon and board executives leave.
It would be absolutely
off. So
it would be absolutely incredible. His Discord is in the description. I'm also putting the Discord in the chat for those that want to join. Look, he has a big army of people that he helps cultivate him to help do the research, but it's not just enough to do the research. You got to be able to communicate it to people like me. And I think Adam is just a gem at getting up for 90 minutes and basically talking without taking a sip of water and explaining high level shit. Like what we talked about is not easy, dude. And being able to get all that stuff out in 90 minutes is absolutely incredible. So please make sure to follow his Discord, join in, interact with him, help him crowdsource all the information so he can come on this stream and talk about it for the masses. And yeah, let's see what we can do in 2024.
Nope. Appreciate it. Thank you. Great year for everybody in 23. Look forward to 24, and I'll definitely be back on again.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Have a great, great New Year's, and we will see you January 1st. Bye, everyone. Have a good one.
Happy New Year, everyone.